The ACLU filed suit today claiming that federal phone surveillance goes far beyond the limits of the Patriot Act.
Julian Assange has been charged under the U.S. Espionage Act.
The UK's broadcast regulator has revoked the license of the Russian government's RT channel.
The motion in the Senate opposing the use of the pro-Palestine phrase from the river to the sea.
Waving a Palestinian flag could in some cases be considered a criminal offence.
Wait, what's going on here? Is the West, which touts itself as a proponent of global justice, closing down avenues of free speech? A recent review of 22 democracies found that 78% of major speech-related laws aimed to limit free expression. This kind of erosion of free speech continues today. Certain types of pro-Palestine expressions are now being suppressed or restricted across the West. Meanwhile, a compliant press and other Western leaders have repeated unverified and ultimately false claims made by the Israeli government.
Western media traditionally have played a very important role in mediating the conflict. They operate as the lens to which many constituents in Europe and the US view the crisis. And if that lens only really presents a particular side of the story, then people in democracies are going to consume an inherently pro-Israeli narrative.
We've seen this kind of narrative control before. In the build-up to the US invasion of Iraq in 2003, Western political leaders spun lies that were uncritically amplified by major media, tying Iraq to al-Qaeda's 9/11 attacks and warning of their secret stash of weapons of mass destruction.
Iraq is a part of the war on terror. Saddam Hussein and his weapons are a direct threat to this country.
Turns out, none of it was true. And it's an old pattern. For decades, Western TV broadcasters referred to the African National Congress as terrorists in apartheid South Africa. Similarly, Western media helped foment fear and nationalism during the Cold War. And today, Russia's invasion of Ukraine has resulted in a tightening of press freedoms. The same kind of censorship is happening with Al Jazeera in Israel. There's a term for all of this: manufacturing consent, a concept originally introduced by journalist Walter Lippmann in 1922. It's also the title of Edward S. Herman and Noam Chomsky's 1988 book, which lays out how powerful people use media to promote their own private interests over public welfare. There's a playbook for how manufacturing consent works. Weaponize passive voice, use misleading terms, stoke fears and perpetuate false narratives. Historian Asselrad shows what some of that can look like in a single headline. Meanwhile, people who believe in the Western project tell a different story.
The West has produced things that work. We've produced the only political system that gives personal liberty to everybody in the society.
They point to moments in history when the West defeated fascism and led the charge to create the United Nations. They also remind us that Western media is the fourth estate. It holds the powerful to account, and when it gets the story wrong, it admits fault. Whatever you believe, it's more important than ever to understand who controls the narrative. With its extensive influence, can we count on the West to promote global justice and free speech as it claims to? Or is it just furthering its own interests?